Picture a hidden window of time,
Mhm.
like an invisible countdown that starts the exact moment a threat actor bypasses a corporate server's firewall,
Right.
because inside that server is, well, it's your entire life. It's your banking credentials, your medical history. It's even the biometric data you use to unlock your phone.
Yeah, it's all of it.
The hacker is in, the data is gone, but you are at home, making dinner, completely unaware that your digital identity has just been stripped down to the studs.
You have no idea.
Exactly. The countdown ticking in the background is the time between that initial silent theft and the moment, which could be weeks or maybe even months later, when the corporation finally decides to send you an email admitting what happened.
The delay.
Right. And during that hidden window, you are utterly defenseless. So today's deep dive is about the man trying to shatter that window and the staggering personal price he paid for basically taking a hammer to it.
It really is a remarkable narrative to dissect, because fundamentally we are looking at a collision here. We have human morality crashing headfirst into institutional self-preservation, and it's all mediated by a legal system that, at the time, lacked even a basic vocabulary for the digital age.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are profiling Alberto Daniel Hill. He's an independent Uruguayan cybersecurity expert and a meta-analyst.
Some call him the Cassandra of Montevideo.
The Cassandra of Montevideo, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to figure out how a catastrophic personal injustice turned him into this massive force reshaping Latin American cybersecurity, we're pulling from a truly wild stack of source materials today.
It's quite the list.
It really is. Like, we aren't just looking at dry threat intelligence reports. We are cross-referencing forensic breakdowns of cartel hacker chats with his back-end Spotify creator analytics.
Right.
We're looking at self-published Amazon manifestos and even, get this, the track lists of electronic music albums he produces.
That diverse array of sources is actually really necessary, though, because of his role as a meta-analyst.
How so?
Well, he operates far beyond the mechanics of just identifying malware signatures or, patching servers. His focus is the sociology of the hack.
The sociology of it, okay.
Exactly. He analyzes the psychological reflexes of state institutions when they're compromised. He's exposing these systemic, global vulnerabilities that remain completely invisible to the average citizen.
But to understand the crusade, I feel like we have to start with the man before the crusade, right?
Definitely.
The resume versus the reality. Because looking at this foundational Grok report we have, his credentials are, well, they're the kind that get you invited into the most secure rooms on the planet.
They indicate an elite, deeply vetted professional. We're talking over 20 years of field experience, a master's degree in computing, high-level project management certifications.
Yeah.
He holds the Certified Ethical Hacker designation, alongside specialized certifications across Linux, Microsoft, Cisco, and Fortinet architectures.
So he knows his stuff.
This is someone who understands digital infrastructure down to the bare metal.
And he wasn't just working in, corporate IT basements either. He was a former government security consultant. But the detail that really stands out to me is his work as an expert witness for Interpol.
That's a huge detail.
Right. He was brought in to assist with early digital forensics cases, specifically involving child pornography. I mean, think about what that means.
Yeah.
When an international policing agency needs someone to decode encrypted hard drives to track down literally the absolute worst predators on the internet, they call him, he is the helper. He represents the absolute apex of trusted cybersecurity authority.
And establishing that level of institutional trust is critical for understanding the whiplash of what follows.
The whiplash is crazy.
It is. He was the established authority that prosecutors and law enforcement relied upon to decipher complex digital evidence. He was entirely embedded within the system of law and order.
Which makes the events of 2014 and 2015 read like some surreal dystopian thriller.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at what the sources call the Circulo Cattolico incident. And it starts with a scenario that is incredibly mundane.
Just a normal day.
Right. He is simply trying to access his ex-partner's medical records on the web portal of a major Uruguayan healthcare provider, the Circulo Cattolico. And while he's navigating the site, he bumps into a vulnerability that is so glaring, it almost feels like a trap.
It is the kind of vulnerability you would expect to see in a what not to do tutorial for high school coding students.
Seriously?
He discovered that the system's administrative backend was secured with default credentials.
Let them guess what it was.
The username was literally admin, and the password was admin.
I mean, admin? I think my grandmother's first Wi-Fi router had better security than that.
It's shocking.
How does a massive healthcare provider leave the front door open like that?
It happens way more often than anyone wants to admit, unfortunately. Usually it's a lethal combination of technical debt and administrative negligence.
Like someone just forgot.
Pretty much. A vendor installs a new database system. They use the default login to set it up, and the IT department simply forgets to change it before taking the system live. But the stakes here were catastrophic. Those default credentials guarded the highly sensitive, intimately detailed medical histories of 200,000 people.
200,000.
We're talking about diagnostics, personal identifiable information, addresses, the exact premium data that brokers sell to extortionists on the dark web. It was a digital goldmine sitting behind a paper-thin door.
So Alberto Daniel Hill, the ethical hacker who testifies for Interpol, does exactly what he has been trained to do. He initiates a responsible disclosure.
Right, the correct protocol.
He contacts Uruguay's CERT, their computer emergency response team, and essentially says, hey, your server is wide open. Anyone can access these 200,000 patient files. You need to lock this down immediately.
He warned them.
Yeah. You would expect them to give him a medal or at least like a consulting contract for saving them from a devastating PR nightmare. Instead, the disclosure leads to a police raid and his arrest.
It represents a staggering institutional failure.
It's insane.
The sources confirm that by 2017 and 2018, as a direct consequence of trying to secure that very system through the proper state channels, Alberto Daniel Hill became the first person in the history of Uruguay to be prosecuted and jailed for a computer-related crime.
Jailed.
Yes. And we must emphasize, based on his foundational texts, he maintains entirely that he did not commit any crime.
Let's ground this in the physical world for a second, just to really highlight the absurdity here.
Sure.
Imagine you're walking home late at night and you notice the back delivery door of a major regional bank is swinging wide open.
Okay.
You look inside and see the safety deposit boxes are completely exposed, so you dial emergency services to let them know so they can send a guard to lock up. The police arrive, they put you in handcuffs, they charge you with bank robbery, and they just leave the bank door swinging open in the wind behind you.
That analogy perfectly isolates the core friction. The intelligence report refers to this as responsible disclosure risks.
Yeah.
It exposes a massive systemic blind spot within the judiciary, particularly in Latin America at the time. But, it remains a global issue today.
But why does that blind spot even exist? I mean, how does a judge look at an ethical hacker warning them about a vulnerability and conclude that the messenger is the threat?
It stems from a profound lack of digital forensics education within legal frameworks. Traditional law relies heavily on physical precedents and tangible boundaries.
Like a broken lock.
Exactly. If a person breaks a physical window to enter a building, the law recognizes that action as trespassing, regardless of whether the person actually stole anything. The intent is secondary to the physical breach of the perimeter.
Okay, makes sense.
But digital boundaries operate differently. Ethical hacking, or white hat penetration testing, requires a highly nuanced understanding of methodology and intent. The court simply did not possess that nuance.
They didn't get it.
They saw an individual who had bypassed the security perimeter, even one as negligent as admin, and they applied archaic criminal statutes. They equated the white hat researcher trying to patch the hole with the malicious black hat actor trying to exploit it.
Okay, but if the state treats the person fixing the alarm system like a burglar, what does that do to the security industry in that country?
It triggers an absolute deep freeze. It creates a terrifying chilling effect.
Okay.
Consider the position of a brilliant independent security researcher today who discovers a fatal flaw in a national power grid or a telecommunications network. If they know the judicial precedent dictates that the messenger gets thrown into a maximum security prison cell, they will simply stay quiet.
You just wouldn't say anything.
Exactly. The entire pipeline of responsible disclosure breaks down. The experts retreat into silence, leaving those critical vulnerabilities completely unpatched until a state-sponsored threat actor or a ransomware cartel inevitably finds them.
God, sitting in a prison cell after trying to protect 200,000 people, that has to break you or completely remake you.
It completely remade him.
Yeah, he clearly realized the system wasn't just making a mistake. It was actively defending its own technical ignorance. So he doesn't fade away. He serves his time, he gets out, and he declares an ideological war on secrecy.
He undergoes a radical transformation. The source material documents his absolute rejection of traditional corporate compliance structures.
NDAs.
Yes, he abandons the industry standard of non-disclosure agreements, quiet settlements, and private consultancy. Instead, he develops and adopts a philosophy he terms radical transparency, engaging in what the reports describe as asymmetric dissidence.
Okay, break down that term for me. Asymmetric dissidence. I mean, we hear asymmetry in warfare, but what does it mean in cybersecurity?
Well, in traditional warfare, asymmetry is a smaller, agile force fighting a massive, heavily armed military using unconventional tactics.
Right.
In this digital context, the massive military is the state, or the multi-billion-dollar corporation. They have armies of corporate lawyers, unlimited PR budgets, and the power of the state apparatus to enforce silence.
They hold all the cards.
Exactly. Hill is the smaller force. He cannot fight them in the courtroom where they have that advantage. So his dissidence relies on leveraging decentralized platforms, open source intelligence, and the raw, undeniable weight of public data to force them into accountability.
He takes it to the streets, digitally speaking.
He takes the battle out of the boardroom and streams it live to the public.
And he builds this architecture of radical transparency around 3 specific frameworks. And they are eye-opening when you apply them to your own life.
They really are.
The first framework is what he calls the protocol of silence.
This defines the systematic, deeply ingrained defense mechanism that institutions activate the very moment a major data breach occurs.
Okay.
When a government agency or a corporate entity realizes they have been compromised, their default reflex is not to immediately inform and protect the public. Their default reflex is to deploy what Hill categorizes as narrative minimization.
Oh, we see narrative minimization all the time. It's that press release that says, we are currently investigating a minor IT incident, or we are experiencing unexpected technical difficulties.
Or the classic, a limited subset of legacy users may have been impacted.
Yeah, right.
The framework argues this isn't confusion. It is a highly calculated choice. These institutions are choosing absolute muteness to protect their corporate valuation, their share price, and their political capital.
At our expense.
Exactly. And they are making that choice at the direct, tangible expense of civilian safety. They know the data is in the hands of criminals, but they stall to manage the optics.
Which brings us to the second framework, and this is the one that really, really gets under your skin. The protocol of silence artificially manufactures what Hill calls the security gap.
This is crucial.
The security gap is that invisible countdown we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive. It is the duration of time between the initial execution of the cyber attack and the moment the institution finally publicly admits it happened.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the danger residing within that gap is immense.
Tell me about it.
The intelligence reports are incredibly explicit about this. While the institution is spending weeks drafting careful PR statements and consulting lawyers, your compromised credentials, your biometric markers, your digital signatures, they all remain entirely active and unrevoked in the wild.
Wait, but why wouldn't they just quietly revoke the passwords or the compromised keys immediately? Like, why leave them active?
Because executing a mass revocation is loud. If a major financial institution suddenly freezes 2 million credit cards on a random Tuesday afternoon, the public instantly knows a catastrophic breach has occurred. The illusion of security shatters.
People would panic.
Right. So, to maintain the protocol of silence, they leave the compromised systems running, desperately trying to patch the leak quietly. Hill describes this as the institution making a strategic gamble on the attacker's honesty.
A strategic gamble on the attacker's honesty. That is such a chilling phrase.
It really is.
They are essentially crossing their fingers and hoping the cybercriminals who just raided their servers are too busy to actually exploit your data before the company can quietly fix the problem. They are gambling your financial stability to save face.
It elevates institutional negligence to an art form. And to measure the scale of this problem globally, Hill developed his third framework, the Global Secretism Index, or the GSI.
Right. The GSI. It ranks nations based on their relationship with digital truth. Like, how do they handle institutional opacity? On the far side of the spectrum, you have high-opacity regimes.
These are jurisdictions characterized by active state retaliation against white hat researchers. Uruguay, during his prosecution, served as a prime example.
Right, where they arrest the good guys.
Exactly. In these regimes, the state suppresses breach narratives, criminalizes the messengers who expose flaws, and cultivates a culture of systemic non-accountability.
And then the alternative.
High-transparency regimes. These are legal frameworks that mandate immediate data breach disclosures. The law dictates that if you lose citizen data, you must notify the public within a strict window, often 24 to 72 hours.
Which makes sense.
Furthermore, these regimes offer robust legal protections for ethical hackers. They provide safe harbor laws so that if a researcher responsibly reports a vulnerability, they are legally shielded from prosecution.
It really forces you to evaluate the environment you live in.
Right.
Like, does your local government mandate immediate disclosure, or are you existing in a high-opacity regime without even realizing it?
A lot of people are.
Are the tech companies managing your data legally allowed to hide a breach from you for 6 months? Every time an app updates its terms of service, you have to wonder if they're just recalibrating their protocol of silence.
It drastically shifts how you interpret corporate communications, doesn't it? But, Hill's work isn't confined to just drafting theoretical frameworks. The source material from 2026 demonstrates how he actively operationalizes these concepts in real time.
Yeah, he has evolved into what the reports call a one-man psychological cert.
A great term.
He doesn't work for a secretive state agency. He runs live threat intelligence operations via decentralized public hubs, and his primary battleground is X Spaces.
He leverages these live, public audio broadcasting tools to intercept, validate, and disseminate threat intelligence instantly. He completely circumvents traditional media gatekeepers and sluggish state reporting channels.
He's doing it live.
Exactly. And the documents detail several high-stakes operations from early 2026 that showcase this methodology.
Well, let's dive into Case Alpha from March 2026. The Cronus Mafia and Target Argentina.
Okay.
The scale of the intelligence gathering here is intense. The Grok report outlines Hill actively monitoring a volatile live audio room in the Mexican cyber underground.
Right. The environment was called Bombitas del Gobierno.
What's that like?
Picture the digital equivalent of a massive, chaotic underground bazaar. It's a 400-person live social audio room populated by active threat actors, hacktivists, initial access brokers, and various underground figures.
Just a free-for-all.
Total chaos. The sheer volume of noise, bravado, and misinformation in those spaces is overwhelming. Filtering actionable intelligence from empty boasting requires immense analytical discipline.
But he is in there, listening. And he isolates a highly specific signal. He intercepts a verified representative from a cybercrime syndicate known as the Cronus Mafia.
And this wasn't just idle chatter.
No, this isn't just someone talking tough. The rep explicitly declares an impending cyber warfare campaign against Argentina.
The intelligence was highly granular. The representative didn't just issue a vague threat. They predicted a massive exfiltration operation, explicitly stating that several millions of citizen records would be compromised by the end of that specific month.
Now, under a traditional compliance model, an analyst might draft a confidential memo, send it up the chain of command, and just hope a government agency acts on it quietly.
Right, in secret.
But Hill, functioning as the psychological cert, takes that raw intelligence, validates the technical feasibility, and broadcasts the forecast publicly in his own technical sessions. He warns the public directly. And the timeline validates his intelligence perfectly.
It does. On March 30th, 2026, the Cronus Mafia executed the data exfiltration precisely as announced. They breached Argentine state infrastructure, laying bare severe vulnerabilities in the state's defensive posture regarding audio monitoring paradigms.
Wow.
The intelligence report actually stresses that Hill maintains a zero-error track record in regional threat forecasting. He isn't just reacting to breaches, he's anticipating them.
But Case Beta from May 2026 is where the philosophy of radical transparency truly collides with state infrastructure. This is the Antel and Tuit high assurance breach.
Yes.
And we need to explain what Tuit is, because this isn't just someone stealing a list of email addresses from a newsletter.
No, this escalates the severity exponentially. The Tuit platform is described as a high-assurance digital identity and biometric validation cloud system.
Okay, so explain the high assurance part. For someone not deep in digital architecture, what is this system actually doing?
It functions as the core infrastructure of digital trust for the entire nation. It relies on public key infrastructure, or PKI.
PKI.
Okay. When a citizen needs to digitally sign a binding legal document, authorize a massive financial transfer, or validate their identity via biometric markers like a fingerprint or facial scan, this system guarantees they are who they say they are.
Got it.
It is the digital equivalent of a government notary and a passport control officer combined. If that system is compromised, the foundation of legal and financial trust basically collapses. A threat actor could theoretically impersonate high-profile citizens and execute legally binding actions.
And the threat actors in this scenario claimed they had successfully exfiltrated an 8-gigabyte core dataset, which critically included exposed API credentials linked to the Tuit backend.
Exactly.
So Hill steps in and does a live public breakdown of the incident, but his primary target isn't the hackers who stole the data. His target is the state's reaction to the theft.
His focus was entirely on the state's execution of the protocol of silence during the remediation process. He provided a fierce technical critique. The compromised back-end files and exposed API credentials meant that the validity of those high-assurance electronic signatures was directly threatened. The state's immediate obligation was to revoke the compromised certificates.
Walk us through how revocation actually works. Like, what should they have done, technically speaking?
Well, when a digital certificate is compromised,
Uh-huh.
you cannot simply change a password. You have to tell the entire global network that the specific certificate is no longer trustworthy.
How do you do that?
You do this by adding the certificate's unique identifier to a certificate revocation list, a CRL, or by utilizing the Online Certificate Status Protocol, OCSP.
Okay.
Whenever a system tries to verify a signature, it checks those lists. If the certificate is on a list, the system rejects the signature. It is the exact same mechanism as calling your bank to cancel a stolen credit card so that any future transactions are instantly declined.
But if they execute those CRL and OCSP validation checks, if they mass cancel those certificates, they are loudly, publicly admitting that their high assurance system was completely breached.
Precisely. The execution of active validation checks shatters the protocol of silence. The public would instantly see that the system failed.
They'd be caught.
According to Hill's live critique, the state chose optics over security. They failed to execute the active revocation protocols. They chose to leave the entire ecosystem vulnerable, exposing the signatures of citizens to potential forgery rather than officially acknowledge the severity of the failure.
Hold on, I want to challenge this approach for a second.
Go ahead.
If Hill goes live on X Spaces and publicly broadcasts that the API credentials are exposed and the state hasn't revoked the certificates, isn't he giving every other bad actor on the internet a map to an open vault? Doesn't radical transparency just make the situation infinitely more dangerous for the citizens?
That is the cornerstone argument of traditional corporate security right there.
Yeah.
Keep the vulnerability quiet to avoid attracting secondary attackers. Hill completely rejects that premise. His counter-argument is that the attackers already have the map.
Because it's leaked.
Exactly. The 8-gigabyte dataset is already circulating in the dark web. The threat actors in Bombitas del Gobierno already know the API is exposed. The only entity currently operating in the dark is the victim.
The public is the only one who doesn't know the door is open.
Exactly. His philosophy argues that secrecy only benefits the institution attempting to hide its failure. The intelligence report quotes his core principle directly, and it's profound. Transparency is not a vulnerability. It is a prerequisite for digital sovereignty.
A prerequisite, wow.
If the state refuses to inform the public cannot take defensive measures. If you know the biometric system is compromised, you can manually monitor your legal filings, you can freeze your credit, you can heighten your personal security posture.
You can protect yourself.
Right. Radical transparency attempts to eliminate the security gap, so citizens aren't left as sitting ducks while institutions manage their PR crises.
That philosophy is put to the ultimate test in the most complex, ongoing forensic drama detailed in the source material. We are looking at a highly specific breakdown from Hill's May 2026 LinkedIn post concerning the Dynacia and Bukibis breach, widely referred to as the Vladdy case.
This one is dense.
Very, and it's vital to note here, for you listening, our goal here isn't to declare guilt or innocence. We are impartially examining how Hill applies his meta-analysis to cut through conflicting narratives in real time.
Maintaining strict impartiality is essential here because the environment is incredibly noisy. We have the state apparatus, multiple decentralized hacktivist groups, and an accused individual, all presenting entirely contradictory claims. Hill's objective is to sift through the misinformation to locate what he calls the structural truth.
Let's map out the players in this digital ecosystem. On one side, we have the state, the Uruguayan judicial system and law enforcement. Their target was state infrastructure, specifically Dynacia, which is the General Directorate of Civil Aviation and Aviation Infrastructure, alongside systems related to Bukibis.
And the state arrested an 18-year-old identified as Vladdy, placing him in custody as the primary suspect for the breaches. The state's narrative frames this as a traditional criminal enterprise, cleanly solved with an arrest.
But the cyber underground tells a completely different story. We have entities like PampaLeaks describing themselves as a hacktivist group and another collective known as Gov.eth or the GOP. If the state says Vladdy is the mastermind, how does Hill use radical transparency to challenge that?
He utilizes narrative correlation analysis. He doesn't just look at the code, he looks at the communication.
Like chat logs.
Exactly. He takes the state's official judicial claims and cross-references them against raw intelligence intercepted from the underground. The sources highlight his analysis of YouTube and Twitter Space transcripts involving gov.eth from April 2025.
Okay.
And, crucially, a highly sensitive Telegram communication summary directly between the Pampa Leaks entity and Hill himself, dated May 20, 2026.
Wait, he is communicating directly with the alleged threat actors?
Yes.
And what Pampa Leaks admits in that May 20th Telegram exchange flips the entire state narrative upside down.
It is an explosive piece of intelligence. In forensic analysis, self-incriminating testimony carries immense weight because it actively contradicts the self-preservation instinct.
You don't usually confess to crimes you didn't do.
Right. Pampa Leaks doesn't deny involvement. They explicitly claim direct responsibility for the technical execution of the Denacia breach.
They aren't just claiming credit. They are providing a highly specific motive for stepping out of the shadows. And the motive is jarring. Pampa Leaks explicitly states, the justice system put him in prison for things I did.
Let that sink in.
They are declaring that the 18-year-old in state custody, Vladdy, is a teenage scapegoat.
Hill's LinkedIn analysis details how Pampa Leaks portrays Vladdy as a legal proxy. The communication describes a decentralized four-person cell structure, including Pampa, Vladdy, and two other unidentified actors. Pampa asserts he was the primary technical architect, but admits he lacked the experience, infrastructure, and maturity to handle what he terms the Falcon government response.
A Falcon response. That implies a rapid, aggressive, highly visible strike by law enforcement to demonstrate total control. It's not about finding the truth. It's about making a fast arrest to quell public panic.
It strongly suggests the state prioritized the optics of a swift resolution over the arduous process of accurate technical attribution. But Hill doesn't rely solely on the word of a hacktivist. He analyzes the technical metadata surrounding the breach to see if the state's narrative actually holds up.
He starts looking at how the breach actually happened. Like, how did they get into Bikibas in the first place?
This involves the concept of initial access brokerage. The underground testimony suggests that the GOP did not deploy a highly sophisticated, custom-built zero-day exploit. They didn't spend months cracking cryptography.
They didn't hack it from scratch.
No. Instead, they utilized a publicly accessible search tool called Intellex, or Intelligence X.
How does Intellex work in this context?
Imagine the dark web has a sprawling supply chain. You have specialized actors whose only job is to scour the internet for people who accidentally fell for phishing scams or downloaded malware, like a Trojan or an info stealer.
Just scraping data.
Exactly. The malware quietly extracts the victim's passwords and uploads them to massive databases on the dark web. The initial access broker doesn't actually hack the target company. They just search these massive databases for corporate email addresses.
Oh, wow.
The testimony states, and I quote, "We decided to use a publicly known tool called Intellex to get leaked credentials of Bukibas. The person whose credentials were leaked opened a stealer."
So they didn't pick an unpickable lock. They just found a copy of the key that an employee had accidentally dropped on the sidewalk months earlier.
Exactly. It points to the exploitation of pre-existing systemic negligence rather than an elite targeted cyber attack. Furthermore, the underground actors argue that simply logging in with a leaked password to deface a website does not equate to the complex infrastructural breach the state is alleging.
Which makes the state's targeting of Vladdy seem even more suspicious. Here's where it gets really interesting. Hill points out that Vladdy was already doxxed. His real identity was already exposed in these underground forums. He was low-hanging fruit.
Very low.
And that ties into a deeply concerning forensic detail mentioned in the report, the 500 Balco theory. Can you explain what that is?
It was a recurring allegation within the intelligence streams. The theory posits that a payment of $500 was made to an informant or an undercover asset on Telegram, ostensibly to guarantee Vladdy's safety within the group.
Okay.
However, mere hours after this alleged interaction, Vladdy was arrested.
So it wasn't a masterclass in digital tracking, it was a setup.
It strongly implies that the law enforcement operation was human-triggered, driven by human intelligence and informants, rather than technically led by tracing complex IP logs or session tokens. They found the kid whose name was already public, potentially utilizing an informant to isolate him.
Hill uses two specific terms to explain why the state struggles so much with these cases: anonymity overlap and the silo or militia effect. This raises an important question. What do these mean when trying to figure out who actually committed a cybercrime?
They define the structural chaos of decentralized cyber warfare. Anonymity overlap refers to the practice of multiple different individuals or groups utilizing the exact same digital handles, tools, or infrastructure interchangeably.
Like wearing the same mask.
Exactly. It creates an intentional fog of war, making it nearly impossible to tie a specific keystroke to a specific person.
And the silo effect.
The silo militia effect describes how these underground groups operate. They are not hierarchical corporations with a CEO and a chain of command. They are loose, shifting alliances of independent cells.
Okay, so very fractured.
One cell might buy the lead credentials, another cell might execute the login, and a third cell might leak the data, all under the banner of a single group name like GOP or Blood Pill.
So when the state arrests one person like Vladdy and claims they have dismantled the entire operation, they are fundamentally misrepresenting how the ecosystem functions.
That is the core of Hill's critique regarding the illusion of attribution. He isn't stating that Vladdy is entirely innocent of any digital trespassing. He is arguing that the state, desperate to satisfy political pressure with a Falcon response, parades a highly visible, doxxed teenager in front of the media as a singular mastermind.
While the real guys get away.
Meanwhile, the actual technical architects, shielded by decentralized networks and overlapping anonymity, remain completely untouched. The state arrests the kid holding the spray paint can and ignores the syndicate that built the wall.
The parallels to his own life are just impossible to ignore. He sees a legal system desperate for a culprit, entirely misunderstanding the technical reality and destroying a life to protect its own reputation.
It's history repeating itself.
Exactly. So how does he process this? Because you don't survive wrongful imprisonment, dedicate your life to intercepting cartel hackers and battle state secrecy without an outlet. He hasn't just built analytical frameworks, he has built a massive, multi-platform cultural ecosystem.
His approach to advocacy is highly unconventional for the cybersecurity sector. Traditional information security communication relies heavily on sterile, deeply technical PDF white papers.
Which nobody reads.
Those documents circulate among a few hundred engineers, but they never penetrate public consciousness. He'll recognize that to dismantle systemic secrecy, you have to capture the attention of the broader culture. He bridges the gap between highly technical forensic engineering and public geopolitical discourse through continuous multi-format media creation.
Let's look at the actual back-end Spotify analytics provided for his podcast, The Cyber Midnight Club. The data from May 2026 paints a vivid picture of who is actually tuning in to this radical transparency crusade.
The demographics are fascinating.
They really are. The audience is heavily engaged, 61.7% male, but the crucial metric is the age distribution. The vast majority of listeners are concentrated in the 35 to 44-year-old bracket.
That specific demographic concentration is vital. He is not primarily reaching a teenage gaming audience.
Right.
The 35 to 44-year-old bracket represents mid-career IT professionals, corporate managers, infrastructure directors, and policymakers. He is broadcasting his critique directly to the individuals who actually design, operate, and regulate the systems he is exposing.
And the reach is significant. The dashboard displays nearly 150,000 overall streams and downloads. But what I find fascinating are the titles of the episodes. He leans heavily into video formats, and the topics are incredibly dense but packaged for engagement.
Like which ones?
We see titles like ROI of One Unmute, the return on investment of One Unmute, which dives into the mechanics of social audio surveillance. We see Tourism 2011, The Protocol of Silence, Crisis Cybernetica de Uruguay.
Crucially, the data shows an audio episode titled Uruguay's Teenage Scapegoat for the PampaLeaks Hack, published right around May 24th through 25th, 2026.
So he is taking the highly complex narrative correlation he published on LinkedIn regarding the Vladdy case and instantly translating it into a 19-minute audio breakdown for his audience. He is acting as his own real-time media network, completely bypassing the state's narrative control.
Exactly.
But the podcast is just one node. Looking at the Amazon storefront data, his output as an author is relentless.
The catalog covers multiple dimensions of his philosophy. Login to Hell serves as the foundational autobiography, detailing his 2017 prosecution and the visceral reality of being an ethical hacker trapped within a digitally illiterate penal system.
That's intense.
It grounds his theoretical work in undeniable personal stakes.
Then you have titles that expand on the geopolitical implications. The People's Code clearly addresses the evolution from offensive exploitation to defensive, transparent advocacy. There's Violetta Digital, exploring digital consciousness, and the digital tightrope of a nation, which confronts the systemic vulnerabilities of state infrastructure.
But the most unexpected vector of his advocacy is found On his YouTube channel dashboard,
Oh, this is my favorite part.
he is actively producing electronic music.
It's brilliant. He is taking incredibly dense cybersecurity frameworks and turning them into art. He has an entire album titled 8 gigas de nada, el protocolo del silencio. 8 gigabytes of nothing. The protocol of silence.
It's very direct.
He literally took the Tuid high-assurance data breach, the 8-gigabyte exfiltration, and his anger at the state's refusal to revoke the certificates, and engineered it into an electronic music project.
The track titles are highly deliberate. The Flower of the Hacktivist, Cumbia de la Motosierra, In Binary Code We Drift Away. The Protectors of Privacy are the Masters of Disguise.
I love that.
Using music serves a critical sociological function. While a podcast reaches thousands of professionals, music and art have the potential to permeate the broader culture. He is ensuring that the concepts of radical transparency and the dangers of the security gap cannot be confined to IT seminars.
He supplements this with long-form writing as well. The sources list Medium articles like The Battlefield of Truth and El Grito Sudaca, the Sudaca Scream. He is demanding that we stop viewing cybersecurity as a mere IT headache and start treating it as a fundamental crisis of human rights and national sovereignty.
It is the ultimate synthesis of his trauma and his expertise. He endured the absolute worst-case scenario of a high-opacity regime, a system that destroyed his life because it fundamentally misunderstood the technology it relied upon.
Yeah.
Rather than retreating into obscurity, he weaponized that experience. He utilizes X Spaces, Spotify data, Amazon Publishing, Medium essays, and electronic music to relentlessly expose the security gap. He forces institutions into accountability by making it impossible for them to quietly sweep their failures under the rug.
We have traced the arc of a man who started as a highly credentialed helper, found himself in handcuffs because he reported a default password, and emerged as the Cassandra of Latin America. Alberto Daniel Hill's journey proves a deeply uncomfortable truth.
What's that?
The greatest threat to your digital life isn't always the anonymous hacker operating in a dark web audio room. Very often, the far greater threat is the deafening institutional silence that follows the hack.
It is the systemic, calculated choice by institutions to prioritize their reputation and their share price over your identity and your security.
Keep that in mind the next time you open your inbox and see an email from a company you haven't thought about in years. You know the exact email I'm talking about. The subject line reads, Notice of Data Incident.
We all get them.
And the very first sentence is always, without fail, we take your security and privacy very seriously. But as you scroll down to the fine print, you realize the breach actually occurred 8 months ago.
For those 8 entire months, you were unknowingly living inside the security gap.
You were experiencing the protocol of silence firsthand. Your biometric data, your passwords, your financial history were sitting on the dark web while executives debated PR strategies. You were the victim of a strategic gamble on a hacker's honesty.
It's unacceptable.
So the next time you log into a portal or scan your face to authenticate a transaction, consider this. If the massive systems designed to protect us are structurally incentivized to hide their failures, and the independent experts like Alberto Daniel Hill who try to expose those failures are treated as criminals, then who actually owns your digital identity? Is it the corporation that lost it, the threat actor that stole it, or the state that refuses to admit it's gone? Keep your eyes open, demand accountability, and whatever you do... Wait, sorry, let me rephrase that. Keep your eyes open, demand accountability, and whatever you do, don't trust the silence.